We recognize the urgency of this moment. I serve as chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and I represent the great state of Maryland. We'll talk about how climate change is impacting the way of life in my state. So I am very concerned about this issue from an environmental point of view and as a senator from Maryland. But I can tell you, as the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, this is a matter of national security.
The melting of the permafrost, which adds to a level of methane emissions that is very difficult to calculate and to appreciate. So this is our reality. This is our reality in the U.S. Arctic, and it is a focus that I have taken up throughout my tenure here in the Senate. Some have suggested that it might be a little bit ironic that someone from an oil and gas producing state is involved in the climate debate. I find no irony at all in it. We must be involved in it because we are impacted, we see it, we face it, and so we must be involved in the solutions as we move forward.
We adopted the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the most significant investment in combating climate by any country in history, and has already deployed more than $300 billion and is on target to employ hundreds of billions more. We have a disagreement over which is the better approach, regulatory versus incentives. We're trying to negotiate around critical minerals, and we have to find a way to work together. As we are working together to support Ukraine in their fight against Russia, so too should we work together in the fight against climate.
By the end of this year, 2023, more money this year is going to have been invested in solar than oil for the first time in world history. And it's never going to go back again. That's good news. In the United States this year, we're going to deploy 34,000 megawatts of solar. In 2009, our total historic amount was 2,000 cumulatively, 34,000 this year, 8,000 new megawatts of wind this year, 42,000 new megawatts of renewables this year.
There used to be a guy named Willie Sutton. Willie Sutton was a bank robber, and he robbed banks. This was probably about 100 years ago, all over the Northeast, and finally got caught. And they took him to trial. He was standing in front of the judge, and the judge said, "Mr. Sutton, why do you rob banks?" And he said, "Your Honor, that's where the money is." Well, the reason why we in climate change, the reason why we go after emissions from cars, trucks, and vans is because that's 35% of the emissions in this country. The reason why we go after emissions from our power plants is because that's about another 30% of the emissions, carbon emissions in our country. And the reason why we go after emissions of like manufacturing operations, think asphalt plants, think steel mills, the reason why we do that, that's another 25%.
Once American industries have to start paying this tariff, they're going to have a whole new outlook on domestic pricing. There are things that we can do so that American companies will not have to pay the tariff. But that means more stepping up on climate. And I am all for more stepping up on climate. So my argument to our EU friends is on the CBAM, no mercy, no delays, no exceptions, no waivers. Stand by your guns and let us step up.
Frankly speaking, how do you get to 51 votes? Well, you do all the things, right, so that everybody's excited that their little thing got into the bill. But as you look at a climate strategy to try to get us to 1.5, you got to do all the things. And some of them aren't going to work. You just don't know which ones. And some of them are going to work beyond your wildest imaginations. And so it's a very simple message, but it's also a political organizing tool. Do all the things. Don't think of the thing that you are particularly excited about as the one thing that needs to get done. Be excited for everybody else's line of effort, because I think that's really what we're going to need to do on policy, but it also helps the politics.